Today I bring you the speech that will shake you awake. The speech that will remind you of something you forgot while chasing people, while chasing approval, while trying to be good enough for a world that never gave a damn. Today, I bring you the speech that isn't about them. It's about you. It's about the man who finally said enough, the man who chose himself when the world refused to. And when he did, he became untouchable. You see, life has a way of breaking men down. Not all at once, but piece by piece. It takes your dreams first, then your confidence, then your dignity. And if you're not careful, it'll take your soul. Most men spend their lives trying to fit into places that were never built for them, trying to be accepted by people who were never meant to understand them. They beg for love. They beg for validation. They beg for someone to just look at them and say, "You matter." But there comes a day, a brutal day, when a man looks in the mirror and realizes nobody's coming to save him. The friends, gone. The woman, gone. The family, silent. The world, laughing. And in that silence, when everything is stripped away, he has a choice: either collapse into the ashes of his own destruction, or stand up alone and choose himself. This isn't a choice many men make. Because choosing yourself isn't glamorous. It isn't easy. It means walking away from every fake smile, every shallow compliment, every person who only loved you when you were useful. It means standing in the dark, bleeding, broken, alone, and saying, "I am still here." And that's when the story of every untouchable man begins. Because the truth is, no one respects a man who abandons himself. No one values a man who values everyone else more than his own spirit. No one fears, no one admires, no one follows the man who bends and breaks just to be accepted. The world has enough weak men. What it doesn't have enough of is men who chose themselves. Imagine him standing in the ruins of his own life, the laughter of others echoing in his head, the betrayal still burning in his chest, the loneliness suffocating his lungs. And yet in that silence, something powerful is born. Not anger, not hatred, but resolve. The resolve that says, "I will not die begging for scraps of love. I will not die chasing the approval of those who never saw my worth. I will not die unnoticed, unloved, unseen. I will rise, and when I do, no one will touch me again." Do you understand the weight of that? A man who chooses himself is no longer dependent. He doesn't need you to validate him. He doesn't need her to complete him. He doesn't need the crowd to cheer for him. He becomes his own foundation. And when a man builds from within, when he learns to carry his own storms, when he realizes he is his own savior, that man becomes untouchable. But let me take you deeper, because this isn't about a fairy tale. It's about the nights you spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every mistake. It's about the mornings you didn't want to get up, because the weight of life crushed you before your feet even hit the floor. It's about the humiliation of trying to be enough for someone who looked at you like you were replaceable. It's about the friends who smiled in your face but vanished when you had nothing left to give. That pain you carry, that's the fire. That silence you sit in, that's the forge. Every tear, every betrayal, every scar, those aren't signs of weakness. They're proof that you're being stripped down to nothing, so you can rebuild into everything. The man in this speech, maybe he's you, maybe he's who you're becoming. He wasn't born untouchable. He was born ordinary. He trusted too easily. He gave too much. He believed people would love him for who he was, not just what he could give. And for that, he was punished. Life took everything. It pushed him face first into the dirt and told him to stay down. But here's the secret no one told him: rock bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning. Because rock bottom is where you stop lying to yourself. Rock bottom is where the noise of the world finally fades. Rock bottom is where you meet the man you really are, stripped, broken, but alive. And that's where the decision is made. He looked around and realized no one's clapping, no one's cheering, no one's coming to help. And in that silence, he whispered to himself, "Then I will do it alone." And that whisper turned into a vow, and that vow turned into a fire. And that fire turned into a man who would never again beg for the world's permission to exist. Because here's the truth: the man who chooses himself doesn't just survive, he transforms. His silence becomes his weapon. His pain becomes his armor. His loneliness becomes his sanctuary. And slowly, step by step, he rises. He rises without applause, without approval, without anyone noticing, until one day, the same world that laughed at him is forced to face the man they can't touch anymore. And that, my friend, is where this story begins. This is not just a speech. This is a warning. This is a reminder. This is a mirror. For every man who's ever been broken, for every man who's ever been betrayed, for every man who's ever been forgotten. This is your call. Stop waiting for someone else to save you. Stop waiting for the world to validate you. Stop waiting for her to love you again. Choose yourself. Build yourself. Save yourself. Because the man who does that, the man who chooses himself, becomes untouchable. Silence. That's where he lived. Not because he wanted to, but because silence was the only thing left that didn't betray him. The laughter had faded. The noise of fake friends had died out. The voices of those who once promised to stand beside him were nowhere to be found. What was left? Just him. Alone, with his scars, with his doubts, with his thoughts. And that's where the transformation began. You see, when a man chooses himself, he doesn't roar. He doesn't make loud announcements. He doesn't post about it. He doesn't beg the world to see his progress. He becomes silent, deadly silent. And in that silence, something terrifying happens. He starts to see clearly. He sees who he really is without the mask. He sees how much he wasted trying to impress people who didn't even clap for him when he was drowning. He sees the betrayal for what it really was, a gift. A brutal, bloody gift that cut him open but forced him to grow armor over the wound. Every day became war. Not the kind of war where swords clash, but the quiet war of discipline. The war of waking up when the world slept. The war of training his body until it stopped shaking. The war of feeding his mind with strength instead of poison. The war of building brick by brick, even when no one cared. That's what separates men who choose themselves from those who wait for someone else to choose them. He stopped chasing. He stopped explaining himself. He stopped begging for people to understand his silence. Because he realized something: silence is misunderstood by the weak, but mastered by the strong. The weak think silence is emptiness, but he knew silence is power. In silence, he could hear himself. In silence, he could sharpen his vision. In silence, he could build the man that no one saw coming. Understand this: the world doesn't fear a man with everything. It fears the man who had nothing and kept going anyway, and that's what he became: ruthless. Not in the way of cruelty, but in the way of resolve. He wasn't ruthless to others. He was ruthless to his weakness. Every excuse, every temptation, every voice that tried to drag him back down, he slaughtered them in silence. Do you know what makes a man untouchable? It's not money. It's not status. It's not applause. It's the ability to walk through the fire alone, rebuild himself without anyone noticing, and come back stronger than anyone imagined. Picture him, rising every morning while the weight of failure still sat heavy on his chest. And yet he moved. He trained his mind until his doubts grew quieter. He trained his body until the reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the broken man the world left behind. He trained his soul until the scars became his strength. He didn't chase women anymore. He didn't chase approval anymore. He didn't chase validation anymore. He chased one thing: the man he could become. And slowly, he began to notice the shift. The same world that mocked him started to whisper his name again. The same people who left him started to peek at his progress. But he didn't care. Their eyes didn't matter anymore. Their voices didn't matter anymore, because he wasn't building for them. He was building for himself. That's the part most men don't understand. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you isolate out of bitterness. It means you create out of clarity. It means you decide, if the world won't give me the throne, I'll carve one out of stone with my bare hands. And so, piece by piece, he carved. He rebuilt his confidence. Not the fake kind that depends on compliments, but the kind that can walk into any room, say nothing, and still command respect. He rebuilt his discipline. The kind that doesn't break under pressure. The kind that moves mountains in silence. He rebuilt his soul, turning his pain into wisdom, his scars into lessons, his loneliness into strength. Day by day, he was no longer the broken man everyone pitied. He was becoming someone unrecognizable, someone dangerous. Dangerous not because he wanted to hurt anyone, but because he no longer needed anyone. That's when the fear set in. People who once laughed at him started to realize they couldn't control him anymore. They couldn't break him anymore. They couldn't use him anymore. Because how do you break a man who already survived being broken? How do you scare a man who has already lived through hell? How do you hurt a man who has already bled everything out in silence? You can't. And that's why the man who chooses himself becomes ruthless. Because he no longer negotiates with his weakness. He no longer begs for what he deserves. He no longer explains himself to those too blind to see his value. He rises without asking permission. He builds without needing applause. He moves without announcing his steps. That's the dangerous thing about silence. You don't see what's happening inside it until it's too late. And by the time the world notices, the man is already untouchable. This transformation wasn't overnight. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't painless. But it was necessary. He learned to suffer without complaint. He learned to rebuild without recognition. He learned to fight without applause. And through that, he became the kind of man no one can stop. Not because he's perfect, but because he's whole. Whole in a way that doesn't depend on others to complete him. Whole in a way that doesn't crumble when people leave. Whole in a way that makes him dangerous to a world built on dependency. And now, as the fire inside him burned brighter than ever, he wasn't just a man who survived betrayal. He was a man who thrived in spite of it. He was a man who walked alone, but never again lonely. He was a man who proved that silence isn't weakness. Silence is transformation. Silence is rebirth. Silence is where men are broken down and remade into something untouchable. This is what it means to choose yourself. This is what it means to become ruthless. This is what it means to become unstoppable. The man who chose himself had walked through fire. He had been cut by betrayal, crushed by loneliness, laughed at by those who swore they cared. And yet, every time life tried to bury him, he grew roots deeper than anyone could see. By the time the world thought he was finished, he was just beginning. This final chapter of his story is not about pain anymore. It is about what happens when a man refuses to let anyone else write his ending. Because here's the truth: when you finally choose yourself, the world cannot touch you. He woke up one morning not with bitterness in his chest, but with clarity. He no longer burned with rage at those who left, no longer replayed the scenes of betrayal, no longer cried out for people who were never coming back. Instead, his silence had matured into something else, a weapon. His solitude was no longer a cage, it was a forge. And inside that forge, he had become steel. People began to notice. The same ones who mocked his discipline now whispered about his focus. The same ones who said he would never make it now tried to get close. But he smiled, not with arrogance, but with the kind of calm only a man who has endured hell can carry. He didn't chase validation anymore. He embodied it. Understand this: the man who chooses himself becomes untouchable not because life stops hurting him, but because hurt no longer controls him. Pain may knock on his door, but it cannot take residence in his soul. Rejection may come, but it no longer defines his worth. He becomes untouchable because his power no longer depends on anyone else's permission, and that's when he became unstoppable. His work ethic turned savage. While the world slept, he built. While the world complained, he executed. While the world searched for shortcuts, he mastered patience. Every day was war, not against others, but against the weaker version of himself. He killed his excuses, strangled his fears, and buried his old insecurities. Each morning, he was reborn sharper, hungrier, calmer, and people couldn't understand it. How did he rise from nothing? How did he walk away from everything and come back stronger? How does he keep going, no matter how many times life tries to stop him? The answer was simple: because he finally understood that choosing himself was not selfish, it was survival. See, when you choose yourself, you stop waiting for rescue. You stop begging for love from people who only gave you conditions. You stop wasting years trying to prove your worth to those blind to it. Instead, you declare, I am enough. I am worthy. I am capable. And I don't need your approval to become who I was meant to be. That declaration changed everything. He didn't become untouchable by avoiding pain. He became untouchable by walking through it without breaking. He didn't become untouchable by isolating himself from the world. He became untouchable by mastering himself in silence, so that no matter what the world threw at him, he stood unshaken. And now, he wasn't just a man who survived betrayal. He wasn't just a man who endured loneliness. He wasn't just a man who rebuilt himself in silence. He was something far greater. He was a man who had chosen himself, and in doing so, he had unlocked a power no one could ever strip away. He became untouchable. Listen to me. There will come a moment in your life when you are given the same choice. Stay broken and wait for someone to fix you, or stand up and fix yourself. Stay silent and hope someone hears you, or turn that silence into power. Keep trying to be chosen by those who will never value you, or finally choose yourself and rise. Most people never choose themselves. They keep begging, waiting, compromising, shrinking, and they die with their potential locked inside them. But a few, just a rare chosen few, wake up one day and realize that no one is coming to save them. And in that moment, their lives change forever. You are standing at that very crossroad right now. The man who chose himself was once just like you, drowning in doubt, bleeding from betrayal, trapped in loneliness. But one choice shifted everything. And if you have the courage to make that same choice, your story can change too. So hear me when I say this. Stop giving the pen of your life to people who don't know how to write your story. Stop waiting for the world to clap for you before you move. Stop allowing rejection, heartbreak, or failure to define who you are. Take the pen back. Write your own story. Choose yourself. Because when you finally do, you'll understand why the man who chose himself became untouchable. He didn't need to scream to be heard. His silence spoke louder than any noise. He didn't need to prove his worth. His existence was proof enough. He didn't need to chase anyone. He was too busy walking his own road. And that's the lesson. Choosing yourself will cost you. You'll lose people. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose the version of yourself that begged for scraps. But what you gain is everything. You gain freedom. You gain peace. You gain strength. And most importantly, you gain yourself. So the final chapter ends not with him broken, not with him waiting, not with him begging for love. It ends with him standing tall, untouchable, unstoppable, unshakable. A man reborn in silence, carved by fire, strengthened by solitude, and powered by the single decision to choose himself. And now the question is, will you?